Hey guys, how's it going? I'm Mel from MelDidItHerself, and I'm a social service worker turned furniture refinisher, DIYer, small business owner, and content creator. I've learned everything I know about these industries thanks to people who shared their knowledge on the internet. So I'm paying it forward by bringing you my tips, lessons learned, and sharing my journey in this space with you. So thank you so much for being here, being curious, and being a lifelong learner like me. Let's hop into it. Welcome, 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 my friends and fellow busybees. I hope you're having a great week full of inspiration and hopefully, if you're lucky, a bit of furniture painting and refinishing. But if not, that's okay too. And if you're new to the furniture upcycling world, then let me provide you with a little mantra to live by as you move forward in your refinishing journey. Prep is everything. Let me repeat that louder for those in the back. Prep work is everything. It's so important, in fact, that I thought it would be fitting to have a full episode dedicated to it and its importance and how to do it properly to ensure that you end up with a beautiful, lasting finish for your furniture pieces. Because after all the time and care and effort that you put into making over a piece of furniture, I would absolutely hate for you to find out that it turned out looking less than desirable as a result of incorrectly addressing the first step you did in the whole process. Because in these instances, it either means you're gonna suck it up and pretend it's fine and you didn't notice it and everything is peachy keen and just move on with your life, or you're gonna have to completely restart the whole thing. I'm so sorry to tell you. And don't get me wrong, I am absolutely here for it if you choose the blissfully unaware approach, if you're keeping the piece for yourself to use in your home. There is nothing that can't be fixed by turning a table around so the imperfect sides are facing the wall, or by moving some carefully placed decor around to hide the spot you blew through the veneer. However, if you are someone who is selling your furniture pieces to others who will be using it in their home, there really is a certain standard that you should be meeting, at least if you want satisfied and hopefully repeat customers. You want the pieces to have the best finish possible and also to have the proper level of durability to be able to keep up with your regular wear and tear that tends to happen in a home. As best as possible, at least. Sometimes there's nothing that will fully withstand our furry friends or little ones when they set their minds on absolutely destroying a piece. But, we do what we can. Okay, so regardless of what kind of furniture piece you are working on, whether it's a dresser or a side table or a bed frame or chairs, a buffet or a bench or even a mirror, something that you wouldn't think would necessarily need it because it doesn't get a whole lot of hands-on use, always, always, always need proper cleaning and prep for the products that you will be using on the piece. This will help the process go smoother, help the products perform their best and how they were intended to when they were made, and it ensures that you have a clean slate to begin your transformation on. If you're familiar with painting, like painting on a canvas, you do the same thing when you're painting a coat of white paint over it to ensure that you have a clean, even base to begin working on. So think of it the same way when you're working on furniture, except it does require a few extra steps when you're working on furniture. First off, you want to disassemble the piece properly so that you can get at all of the nooks and crannies properly for cleaning. So if there's any hardware on the piece, you want to remove that. And if there's any doors on the piece, you might want to remove those too, depending on how much you're able to access all of the parts with the doors on. As a reminder, I always caution that if you're going to be removing doors off of a piece and taking the hinges off, just always make sure that you're marking which ones are coming off of which side and storing them in a Ziploc bag or something with the hardware, like the screws probably, that were used to adhere it. That way, when you go to put it back together, you'll know exactly where it came from, and so in theory, it should go back into place perfectly and be well aligned. At this point, I also recommend pulling out any drawers that may be in the piece and just open it all up so that you know what you're working with. And because I have gotten stumped a time or two on this part of the process, let's talk about the different ways that drawers can be released from a piece of furniture. Because yes, some of them just have simple drawer glides and will slide right out when you pull on them, but some of them have different mechanisms or stoppers to keep them from being able to be pulled all the way out. I'm assuming as a safety piece so that kids can't pull them out onto themselves. So the simple answer is, if you come across one that appears to have something stopping it from being able to be pulled out completely, just get down and inspect it a bit. Sometimes there'll be something along the side of the drawer sitting in the glide that you need to push in so that you can slide it past a bar. Sometimes there will be a screw that you need to remove to accomplish the same thing. And I've also seen it where there's a screw you need to take out from the bottom underneath the drawer itself on the runner. If you can't seem to see anything on the glides or underneath, it could be that you just need to angle the drawer up a bit when you're pulling it out to bypass the end of the slide on the side. And if all of those things don't seem to be an issue, but you still can't get it out, I've also had a piece before that required just a little added yank on it when it got to the end of the slide to pull it off. So just feel free to take out a little bit of frustration on it, and it might just end up working if all else fails. And for the record, yes, I am equally as confused when talking about these pieces because all the parts just sound so similar. Glides, guides, slides. Why wouldn't they call them things a little bit more drastically different? Anyways, the next step is to thoroughly clean the piece. Sometimes we like to think that we can sneakily skip this step because you can see it and you have two eyes and it looks clean, or because it was a piece coming from your own home, so you know how dirty it would be, right? Wrong. Clean it every time. Sometimes there's dust, sometimes there's grime, sometimes there's grease, and sometimes it could just benefit from a nice refresh. Like, when you have a shower and it just somehow turns you into a brand new human ready to take on the world? Same thing. Well, same but different. In terms of the actual cleaning, something as simple as Dawn dish soap mixed with warm water and using a microfiber cloth to wipe it all down can work wonders. The main thing you are looking for is a soap with degreasing agents. So something like a good quality dish soap would ideally already have those properties in it. There are also various types of cleaners that you can use specifically for this. I use something called TSP, or trisodium phosphate if you fancy. It's a heavy-duty cleaner and degreaser, and I get it from Home Depot typically, but you can find it at different retailers. It's made specifically to remove wax, residue, and grease from surfaces, and honestly, when I started watching people refinishing furniture online years ago, I always heard them talking about this product, and I saw it in store once, tried it, and it did the trick, so I've just continued to use it. And I usually wipe it in and off with a microfiber cloth or a shop towel, and it gets the piece all nicely cleaned and ready. But do use some discretion for sure, because if the piece is noticeably dirty or caked with dirt and grime, and it does happen, you might need to use something like a scrubby brush to really work it in to clean it thoroughly. And once you wipe the piece with whatever cleaner it is that you're using, and it seems like it's all good to go and nicely cleaned, grab a clean, damp cloth and just wipe the surface thoroughly again, just to make sure that you're getting rid of any residue that might be left over on the piece. Now, I have seen some people hose off pieces that are really dirty, and while it is definitely an option, that is introducing a lot of water and moisture into the piece unnecessarily, which can alter the way that the piece sits or warp it in some instances, similarly to how wood furniture can shift the way it sits after it goes through really harsh weather changes. So I recommend trying to avoid that if possible. If you absolutely have to, definitely ensure that you do it early on a sunny day and let it sit out to dry thoroughly on the inside and the outside before you start doing anything else to it. And if you are going to be hosing it off too, make sure that you know for sure that it is solid wood that you are using, because if there's a veneer, or if it's even worse, made up of melamine or particle board, that could really damage the material itself and have it start to disintegrate or lift off of the other pieces of the furniture. So the cleaning process is important for the cleaning aspect, of course, but I also find that it's a great opportunity to get up close and personal with the piece in a way that you maybe didn't do as thoroughly when you first found the piece or picked it up. While taking apart all of the components and wiping everything down, it's your chance to look for any nicks and dings that might need to be filled, to discover any repairs that might be needed, assess if any veneer to see if it's maybe going to be lifting in any areas, and also take a whiff to see if there are any smells that will need to be masked that didn't disappear from the simple cleaning. That will help you to determine the next steps, because now that we have it all squeaky clean and dried out, we can move on to any repairs that are needed. I personally try to shy away from any pieces that will require any huge repairs, especially more structural ones, because A, it will require added time and effort and products, and B, just for the liability of it if I'm going to be selling the piece. However, I will say that that is one of the best ways to learn something new or to acquire a new skill, so you can determine for yourself what feels right. Also, there are some types of repairs that I've come across that look like they might be complicated, and it was just a matter of getting the right tool to be able to get the job done. So Google is absolutely your friend in these types of situations, and you will be very surprised with how accurately it can figure out what your problem is and the associated solution by you just trying to describe it into the Google search bar. And once you have the proper terms for the items that you're trying to tackle, head over to YouTube because there is likely a visual tutorial that you can follow. The world of YouTube has been an absolute godsend and is essentially the reason that I ended up getting into this kind of work. So there is a ton of knowledge over there. The products that I typically use for the types of repairs that I commonly come across are Elmer's wood filler or Elmer's ProBond Max wood filler to fill any surface level scratches and nicks that might need to be filled. There's lots of types of wood filler out there that work well, I'm sure. I just like this brand because it has many different colors that you can choose. There's ones that are lighter or darker to match with your piece as best as possible, which is helpful both when planning on staining or painting your piece. For repairs that need something a little bit more substantial of a product to fill a hole or repair an edge or something like that, I'll often use Quikwood. It has an incredibly bizarre scent, but it's more of a Play-Doh consistency, so it's easier to build it up and to shape it a bit. And then when it fully dries, you can shape it more by sanding it as needed. For larger or more structural repairs, people often use Bondo, which is an auto body filler, so it's super durable. I haven't used it myself because, like I said, I often try and just avoid those bigger repairs at this point. However, I've seen so many people use it regularly that I feel pretty confident recommending the product even without having tried it myself. But I have also heard that it has a very strong scent, so make sure that you have an outdoor space that you can use if you opt to give it a go. And final note on the subject of repairs is to always look at your piece from all angles, including flipping it upside down, and that goes for cleaning too, because you would be very surprised with how many spider webs can hang out under there. There's been so many times when I got a piece and it was wobbly and I thought that it was going to be a big convoluted repair, and it was just a matter of tightening some screws underneath or something like that. So make sure that all of the parts of the piece are sitting where they should, and that might help more than you would think. And one more thing that I should mention, since I'm going through these steps in chronological order, is that it's at this step that I would recommend drilling new hardware holes if you plan on switching out the hardware for the piece. I tend to find it easier to do it at this stage rather than waiting till the very end in case you make a mistake or something, but it could just be a matter of personal preference. So, now that we are fully repaired, it depends what you plan to do with the piece. Sand it down completely, sand and stain, sand and whitewash, or paint wash, just paint it. If you plan to be sanding it down fully and either leaving it as is, paint washing it, or staining it, then technically your piece is now fully prepped because you can just jump right into that stage. But if you plan on painting the piece, then we do have an added step or two still. First up, we want to scuff sand the entire piece to give the paint and maybe the primer some teeth to sink into to grip better to the piece. Will going straight in with paint allow you to paint the piece without scuff sanding? Yes, it will. But the finish won't last as long or be as good, and because we want it to be durable, which is the whole reason we are being thorough with our prep work, we aren't going to start cutting corners now. So to scuff sand your piece, your aim is to get past that first top layer of finish on the piece that might be a bit glossy or have any sort of finish left on it to uncover a bit of a rougher surface beneath. I usually scuff sand with anything between 150 to 220 sandpaper grit, depending on the piece that I'm working on, because it does a good job of roughing up that surface without completely trying to strip it back to the bare wood. So lightly sand the entire piece, and if it's a wood piece, make sure that you're sanding in the direction of the wood grain. Then remove any dust that might be left over on the piece when you're done. I like to use an old big paintbrush from the dollar store that I use just to get rid of dust and brush off whatever I can. And then I'll wipe the surface with a dry microfiber cloth and then go in with another damp microfiber cloth to get off any remaining dust and let it dry. A product that people commonly use to remove dust is a Tack cloth, and while I have tried using them in the past, I don't super love the feel of it, and I find that it can leave a bit of a residue, so I don't often grab for it. And finally is the priming stage. Now, this isn't an absolute requirement for all pieces. Some might be okay to just jump into painting after the scuff sanding. However, it never hurts to prime, so again, if you want to be thorough, it is good practice to just do it anyway. Ultimately, it will help you to get a more flawless finish and consistent finish, and it will definitely help with proper paint adhesion. And there are two instances when I would absolutely always recommend you do prime, which is when you have used a wood filler or done any repairs with those types of products. And also if you are painting a darker wood piece like oak, cherry, walnut, or mahogany, because those are the wood species that tend to have more bleed through. The reason you want to prime if you have used wood filler or done any repairs with a similar product is because you now have two different materials that you will be painting over. Are you expecting the paint to look the same when you paint over these two very different materials? No, of course not. So we need something else to sandwich between them to even the playing field and level it all out, which is primer. When you put that layer over top of the materials, it evens everything out because that is what it was made for. And then when you apply your paint over the primer, you would never know that there was a repair done there, assuming that you sanded all of the filler product down smooth before before priming. And sometimes people are hesitant to use primer when they're planning on painting with a dark color because they don't want to bring the piece all the way up to a bright white when priming, just to have to try and make it pure black when painting and require a ton of layers of paint to achieve that color. Or they might be concerned that the white underneath will lighten the color that they're putting over it. The way to avoid either or both of these situations is to tint your primer. Similarly, when you go to the hardware store and you can buy a can of paint for your walls, it comes white typically, but then you take it to their paint people and they work some magic and tint it to the color that you choose, and the same can be done with primer. P.S. Have you ever seen those TikToks of them doing the color theory and like using the machine to tint paint? It is so ASMR. Highly recommend going to check it out if you haven't. It's just like so interesting. Anyways, that's a tangent, but look it up. It's very intriguing. So keep an eye out when you're buying your primer because some will say tintable white or tintable clear on the label, and you can do it a darker color or potentially even the same color that you will be painting if they can color match it or you're using a brand of paint that they also carry. Work smart, not hard, my friends. And if your piece is one of those wood species that I mentioned that tend to have a lot of bleed through, you'll want to prime it and prime specifically with a primer that states that it is stain blocking in order to hold the bleed through from getting through the finish and affecting the look of your paint. Bleed through refers to the wood tannins that seep through the paint if they aren't sealed in, and sometimes they won't show up right away, so you might not notice them peek through until after you've top coated your piece and it's just sitting and curing, which is a bit of a nightmare, so make sure that you're proactive and avoid this step by priming. Bleed through looks like a bit of a stain that comes up through the paint. Typically you see it when painting with lighter colors because they're more noticeable, but it definitely happens on dark and black pieces too. It's just camouflaged a bit better. And also note that depending on how stubborn the wood is, you might need multiple coats of primer to fully mask the bleed through, so take the time at this step to let the primer fully dry, and if you can swing it, let it sit for 24 hours once you think that you have enough coats on it, just to see if anything tries to peek through before you move on to painting. Also worth noting, if you find that you have any pesky odors in or on your furniture piece, priming it can also help to mask those odors, so that's another time that I would definitely recommend doing this step. Alright, now that the piece is fully primed, you have officially completed your thorough prep stage successfully. Congratulations! And now you can move on to the fun stuff. Because I don't think I've ever come across someone who says that their favorite part of refinishing furniture is the prep work. Some people maybe hate it a bit more than others, and some find it kind of therapeutic because it is so procedural. But for the most part, everybody loves the painting or designing or staging and photographing stage far more, and that's totally fine. It's a necessary evil that, again, we won't be skipping, right? Good, okay, that's what I thought. And I've mentioned it in a previous episode, but I want to reiterate it again. There are some paint companies or brands or lines of paint that market themselves as needing no prep or very little prep. And again, yes, they will work, but ultimately, my recommendation is to always be thorough in the prep stage and just go through these steps to help yourself out long term. Those types of paints may perform better than your average paint line if you don't do any cleaning or prepping, but I guarantee you that they will perform even better if you do. So I warned you. But have fun and enjoy the process and don't feel the need to rush it. Sometimes if you have multiple pieces, it's a little bit more enjoyable to batch this work and do a few pieces at once when you're cleaning and repairing and scuff sanding and priming, and then you're getting it all out of the way at once. So that might be a tip that's helpful to lessen the frustration or the boredom that you might find yourself with at that point. But just find a great playlist, throw on a podcast or an audiobook, and just enjoy the ride. And something that you might not know about me, I love little motivational messages. They literally always get me fired up, and I keep a running list of ones that are especially catchy or speak to me in the Notes app on my phone. So I'm going to end every podcast episode with one of those that I've noted down over the years in hopes that you leave our time here each week feeling inspired, motivated, and ready to take on whatever comes your way this week. So this week's Mel's motivational message is, if you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you've always got. That is an ode to proper prep work when doing a furniture makeover, or the closest thing I could find in my bank of quotes. But more so about life. Unhappy with the way something is going? Well, what have you done to try and shake it up and change it? The only way you're going to get movement or transformation in any area of your life or relationships is by changing your approach to things and experimenting. If you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you've always got. I feel like it rolls off the tongue nicely too, don't you think? So remember that as you go into the next week, take a step back and reevaluate what you can do a little bit differently next week and see if it has any impact. If you are enjoying the podcast so far, I would love it if you would go to the podcast page on whatever platform you're listening on today and leave me a rating and review, preferably 5 stars, but I'll leave that part up to you because that will help get this pushed out to more people to discover and join us on this furniture refinishing ride. And I always appreciate it when you share the episodes with somebody who you think might benefit from it to help get the word out as well. All right, that's it for now. I appreciate your time, and I'll catch you guys next week.